Well, this is a great night. An old friend of mine is back. Jerry Stahl has written extensively. He has the career every writer in Hollywood wants. He's written extensively for film and television. He's written 10 books, including the best-selling memoir, Permanent Midnight. There are essay collections, novels. His new book, 999, One Man's Tale of Depression, Psychic Torment, and a Bus Tour of the Holocaust, 999, comes out on July 5th. And on June 12th, he will be here in New York City at the 92nd Street Y. I'm sorry, the 999 Street Y with Ben Stiller, who played him in Permanent Midnight, to discuss his new book. And if you're in our Zoom audience, submit some questions on the Q&A, and we'll take the last 10 minutes for audience questions. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, David. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. The last time you reached out to me, you had asked me spontaneously to be on your show one day, and I was having a root canal and couldn't do it, and I never heard from you again.
Oh, okay. Well, I figured I can't compete with root canal. I know I'm annoying, but I can't be annoying as root canal.
A guy can dream.
Yeah. You were on the show, I think, when your piece came out about your tour of Holocaust sites. I guest hosted for a little bit, for a second. And right.
I think it was. There was a thing in Vice, a 6-piece thing in Vice.
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, you were my host on the radio show when I couldn't do it.
Way back before the mop-up with a twinkle in your eye, I think.
So let's talk about, because we're the theme tonight is Nazis. Well, every night the theme on the show is Nazis. You write about in your new book that you went on if this is Tuesday, it must be Bergen-Belsen type of tour of the camps. Describe, in all seriousness, describe what you signed up for. Not why, but just describe what you...
There is an entire culture of people who tour by bus, mostly middle class, not rich people, let's just put it that way. And they go around the world and they do it by bus. And I signed on for, I believe it was like a 12-day, 3 concentration camp and hotspots in between with a bunch of people, from many of whom had never seen a Jew. So there was that. I was the designated Jew. And we started in Poland. Went from Auschwitz to Buchenwald to Dachau. And it was an alarming, but certainly edifying experience.
Alarming because of the camps or the people on the bus?
Well, I will be dead honest with you, and obviously not trying to look good here. I was much more terrified of riding a bus with a bunch of perfect strangers than I was of confronting the horrors of the past, because we've to some extent we've seen those, and what I wanted to see is whether, in fact, one is benumbed by the endless images and sagas and pictures and photos, and there's a whole other level to these camps that I was not aware of. So it was eye-opening.
But before we get to the camps, we're talking with Jerry Stahl, and your book comes out next month, I believe, in July, right? 999.
And it's July. 9 as the German 9, not 999.
The Herman, was it Herman Cain?
Exactly. A lot of people think that I owe Herman Cain some kind of royalty beyond the grave, but in fact, it's just a grim coincidence that the first thing people say is, "Oh yeah, you got that from Herman Cain, huh?" So there's that.
But you did. I remember this. In 2020, you called Herman Cain up and you said, "Are you going to Trump's rally in Oklahoma? Don't wear the mask." I remember you told him that.
I still feel bad. You know, it was a fatal bit of advice. Herman and I talked, and I wouldn't say that'll teach him, but it taught him. So it's done. Herman's not with it any longer. But thank you for bringing that up. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes we hurt our friends. We don't mean to, but we do.
The people, it's so good to see you. The people on the bus, why would somebody go on a bus? Is it pornography? If you're not a gypsy, if you're not a Jew, if you're not the grandchild of Dr. Joseph Mengele and you want to visit where he used to work, why do people with no emotional connection to these camps, why would they go on these tours?
It's a great question. And our first night there, we were in a kind of sausage grotto in Warsaw. And we had to go around the room and say why we were going on this particular trip. And a lot of people said, well, I've always had an interest in the Jewish people, which I don't know why that scared me, but it did. And the rest of them said, Schindler's List. I saw Schindler's List, so I wanted to, where the Jews are, alternate time. So a lot of them wanted to see on the basis of having seen Schindler's List. And ironically, those people were more interested in seeing where the actors who starred in Schindler's List stayed when they were shooting the movie than Schindler's actual museum.
No.
Well,
that can't be.
Perhaps I am.
God.
Yeah. That's human nature, Dave. But these were great people. I mean, I grew to like these people, though I was a bit. I don't know about what your high school experience was. I did not have a good bus history. I had many bad things. Somebody once vomited into my mouth on a bus on going to school. I was that kid in the back that nobody liked. Bad things happened. I won't get graphic, but things happened, David. And I had to walk through that fear in the interest of pursuing my personal and, cultural history.
And you were the only Jew on the bus.
There was one other man who I grew to love, an older fellow who was a displaced person. He wasn't in the camps, but he was in a DP camp when he was about 10, 1930, I believe. And he was an interesting guy. We became friends, but he was very much a believer in Donald Trump because according to the Bible, Trump was predicted, King Cyrus, who, let's call him Moshe, this guy. Right? I did. So let's pick Moshe. And he liked Trump, even though he said he was a rascal, because he was predicted, and that's what we needed. That's what America needed. So we had a lot of good-natured ribbing because you eat, sleep, and ride with these people. Well, you don't actually sleep with them, but you have breakfast every day, you have meals, dinner, and then you ride all day and you talk, And,
now,
please.
Well, let's talk about the camps. Which one is your favorite?
I had a experience that was odd and unanticipated. My first, I'm staggering out of the ovens in Auschwitz, and I'm horrified. I'm numb. There's no words to describe it once you're there. And suddenly, I hear behind me, "Kraima, Kraima, Kraima." It turns out these people are talking to me. There's some young women. I'm not sure what country they're from. They had an accent, and they thought that I was Michael Richards, Kramer. And they wanted to take a selfie with me. And what prepares you for that? What is the etiquette for when you're at a death camp? Somebody wants to take a selfie thinking you're a celebrity, and you're not even that celebrity. And I'm just meeting my fellow writers, and I don't think this is making a good impression. I'm taking a selfie with a bunch of, Filipina young ladies. I'm not sure. Very nice. but I felt awkward, but I felt like I couldn't say no. I didn't want to make a drama out of it. And that was my introduction.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many camps did you visit?
I hit 3, the big 3.
The big 3.
Yeah.
Dachau, Auschwitz. There were 2 near.
There were Buchenwald. Why do I keep saying Buchenwald? Like it's Idlewild. Buchenwald, right. Auschwitz, and Dachau. And so I went from Poland and ended up in Munich after Dachau.
So Dachau, was that the first or one of the first concentration camps, I would assume, Dachau, since it was in Germany?
I believe the first concentration camps were actually in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Right. I may have history wrong.
Right. That I meant for yes. Yeah.
For our people.
Yeah.
I do not know the first. I should know this, but I do not know specifically the first one, because there were the work camps and slave camps like Buchenwald, where they weren't specifically death camps. They essentially worked you to death. But Auschwitz, they worked you, but they also killed you straight out when they made the selection when you got off the train.
Right. Okay, so I would assume you were raised with an obsession with the Holocaust, and you try to read.
Raised a Jew, yeah.
And what did you learn about the Holocaust by being there? What was it that you said, okay, I didn't realize this. I had to go there to see this, to understand it better. What did you?
There were many just bizarre specifics. For example, I believe it was Buchenwald, where they didn't just put a body in the oven, bad enough. They would bring the prisoner in, hang them from a hook, so that this person, the SS was so sadistic, so that this person saw what was coming. And then after they were hanged by the neck and dead, then they were put in the oven. It's one specific of many, but it's the one that haunts me many nights. The other things.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
Like you,
I'm here for you.
With chicken, like, did they put them on a hook?
I beg your pardon?
Like a slaughterhouse where you put the animal, like you bleed it out on a hook. And
no, I think they hung them. As it was explained to me by the tour guide, they hung them. They didn't just stick them on a hook. I see what you're saying. Yeah, like a Peking. No, it wasn't like that. But it is alarming all over Poland and Germany. I mean, if you don't want to see how the sausage is made, don't go to Germany, because every window is like a pig hanging upside down, and that's for the Hausfrau or Fräulein or male Fräuleins. I don't know what they're called. And it's a strange culture. I'll tell you what it was for me. There's many details, not just about the camps. I don't know if you've been to those countries, the Jew-hating countries.
No.
But if you're in a coffee shop, David, and you see a man of a certain age who's like 80, 90 years old, you're thinking, and he's kind of looking at you sideways, giving you stink eye. It's hard not to believe that back in the day, this guy was like juggling baby Jews and bayoneting them for recreational purposes in his teens. And it's horrifying. And I could not shake that sense. I've never had that awareness. And there's a visceral sense you get, which I guess is what I'm trying to get at. As much as I want to, I could go into the details and the things I didn't anticipate. What I did not anticipate was the most was the fact that you want to have this reaction when you get there. It's the most powerful, it's the largest crime scene in history. It's this powerful historical, cultural place. And you realize that any response at all is almost insulting, because there is no response you can have that is worthy of what these people went through. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. There's a movie about the mass slaughters in Indonesia. It's called The Act of Killing.
Right? The Act of Killing. That is a crazy movie. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. They reenact the killings, and this guy's glamorous and he's still alive and he was the main killer. Am I right? Am I remembering right? Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost it was like a bizarre, horrific fantasy that these people were happy, laughing, loving, and they
proud.
And got caught up in this genocide, I think, of Marxists for Sukarno.
I was never sure who exactly their victims were. It seemed to be whoever they hated, whoever they didn't like that day. But you probably have a better memory than I do. Mine's shot.
No, but one of the takeaways from the act of killing is there are seasons to a man's life. And we all did some crazy things in the 70s, and that's not who I am anymore. And you move on. I'm a different person. And you see this with the Nazis, that this was a period of my life where I was, as you say, juggling babies with a bayonet. But those days are over. Now I'm married, I've settled down, and I'm a different person.
Way childish things, I think is what you're saying, as the poet said.
Yeah.
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 I guess.
I put away childish things on the bayonet.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Yeah. Leave it to you. There is a sense that, obviously, one of the things that's most horrifying when you get to Nuremberg and they have this list of statistics, like the number of Nazis, murderers, killers, SS, who actually paid any kind of price whatsoever is so minuscule. And even the few who went to prison were let out early, by and large. A few. Goering cheated the hangman by having a little cyanide smuggled into his cell. But by and large,
the hangman got paid anyway. I always wondered about that.
They get paid up front. I mean, there are no fees. They know what can happen. That's in the contract. You talk to any hangman and he'll tell you. I showed up. It's not my fault,
I brought the rope.
Exactly. I could have been at home. I didn't want to be here. So yeah, I believe that's how it worked.
So we were talking earlier about the Nuremberg trials, and there was one corporation that actually got tried at Nuremberg for its participation in Nazi Germany. They picked Nuremberg because that's where the Nuremberg laws were written, right? The Nuremberg codes.
Right. That's one reason. Another reason is, I do believe I'm not mistaken here, but I might be. I think this was where Leni Riefenstahl shot those insane Olympic, the Olympics with the 500-foot tall eagles and
the rallies, the Nuremberg rallies.
Yeah, the Nuremberg rallies. So I think they wanted to kind of rub the Nazis' nose in it, so to speak, back to the scene of their greatest glory and make it the scene, at least ostensibly, of their humiliation.
She never paid a price, Leni Riefenstahl, right?
No.
She didn't go.
But Bud Cort, not to be a name dropper, but I ran into this guy who I know, an actor, member, Bud Cort.
Bud Cort from the movie with
Ruth. Look at us. Look at us, two old guys with one memory between us. Yes, that guy. And he said, I told him I was going over. He said, I went over there with like Marlon Brando's photographer or something. This is the guy I know from standing in line at Trader Joe's. We're not like good buds or anything, but a great guy. And he said, I met Leni Riefenstahl, and she was very dry, very matter of fact. But as I was leaving, she kind of grabbed me with her arm and took me back and said, one thing nobody knows about Hitler. I'm not going to do the accent. He had a great sense of humor. And I was stupid enough to recount this story to my fellow bus travelers. And they weren't hip to irony. They thought I was just very creepy when I told that story. So that happened.
That's true that he had a good sense.
Well, no, I don't know if it's true, but it was just this crazy thing that Leni Riefenstahl said to Bud.
His favorite joke was knock, knock. I'll ask the questions. Don't you ask who's there. I will ask the questions. You told me before fecal transplants became a thing, you told me, it's one of those things, like you hear a word, you look it up, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. When you first came on my show, you told me about Hitler's fecal transplants and the Bulgarian.
Yes, well, his doctor, Dr. Morell, Hitler, there's a terrific book called Blitzed about all the drugs the Nazis did, and specifically Hitler. He did amphetamines, he did cocaine, he did morphine. But Dr. Morell, who kept him alive, got him up and going in the morning, put a spring in Hitler's step. He would put a tiny bit of Bulgarian fecal matter. Not too much, not too little, just enough, because he believed that the Bulgarian had the most, they were just the most vital men on the planet. So, yeah, that was before fecal transplants. Funny you bring that up. Yeah, so Hitler was essentially geezing Bulgarian shit. I don't judge, but that's what Dr. Morell was giving him. I mean, it was completely crazy by the end, not from the shit, but from the other drugs, although I don't know what the shit does.
You told me, and then you told me this, and then all of a sudden I'm reading about fecal transplants, and that it turns out that the Bulgarian men, they were like stevedores. They had some kind of diet.
That's a word you don't hear often enough anymore. Stevedores, yeah.
And that that was the feces you wanted inside of you. The concentration camps were cities. They had prostitution. They had. It wasn't just barracks, right? There were.
No, there was a lot going on. Some of them were like SS training grounds, and some of them were used by, the drug makers for slave labor, and our famous rocket scientist, and best friend of JFK, the rocket guy who got us to the moon and whose name has just mysteriously escaped me.
Werner.
Yes, Werner. Werner von Braun. There we go. Thank you.
Von Braun. Yeah. No, he played Colonel Klink on Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, he had a great second half. Great second half. Yeah. Came over here, said, forget the Rockets. I got the showbiz bug now. And he went, yeah. But I'll tell you something about Hogan's Heroes. I don't know if you ever heard of the film Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, which is the famous piece of Nazi exploitation. It's a kitsch classic based on the true story of Ilse Koch, the wife of the Buchenwald camp commandant. That was actually shot on the set of Hogan's Heroes on weekends.
On the weekends?
On weekends, and before they closed it down, the studio was going to destroy it anyway, so this production company bought it because they torched it in the last scene. So it's just a weird, I don't want to say a fact, but a bizarre fact that's where we shot. I don't know if you've seen the movie. If you haven't,
is it worth watching? Is it?
It's a very twisted, campy kind of 70s. It was this genre that had been introduced called Nazi exploitation. But the real Ilse Koch, as I learned from this very eloquent young tour guide, was even worse than the character played.
Was she? What did she do? Was she tortured? Was it sexual? Was she?
Well, partially sexual. She would ride through the camps, basically half naked or wearing skimpy clothes. And if anyone looked at her, she would have them killed. But then she would crook her finger, and she would bring these guys in for sex. And after a night, she would have them killed then. And she also was obsessed with tattoos, apparently. So she would have the people who had anybody in the camp who had the misfortune to have a tattoo would have their skin essentially sliced off. And she would make wallets out of it. Everything you've heard was essentially true. And the most perverse thing to me was she used thumbs as light switches in her house. Actual.
That makes sense. That makes sense, though.
Well, I guess when you think about it ergonomically, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. You take it one step farther. But yeah, I guess there is a logic to that if you're going to, but there's a tragedy to it. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you worry that in 10 years, when everybody's dead, not the whole planet, that's in 15 years, but 10 years, most of the people who witnessed the Holocaust will be gone. It will be so unimaginable that Holocaust deniers will have a field day, because it is unimaginable that people could be that bestial, right? I mean, is it?
It's both unimaginable and absolutely inevitable if you have a darker view of human nature. I mean, I think, who was it? Ashley Montagu or someone said, liberty is the moral right to get away with as much as you can without getting caught. And the Nazis, they were just told they did whatever they wanted, and this is what they wanted. They justified it with racial laws. They justified it with, we need more land, we need the labor, but essentially it was just man unleashed, and I don't have a very optimistic view of my fellow man. But to answer your question, I don't know. Do you think it will disappear when the last sort of Altecocker is gone and the last survivor?
I think it's so unimaginable. I think about the way I was taught slavery growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't told about the Middle Passage, the way they stacked live human beings like lumber on a boat, and they set sail for America. That wasn't taught to us.
No, it wasn't. And
even now, and I'm probably not reading enough, we don't, there must have been that level of sadism on the plantations. Absolutely.
I think it's been going on throughout history, but this happened to be to our people in our time in the most recent century, and it was pretty well documented. One of the things that Patton would do, of all people, when the townspeople denied that anything was happening in their beautiful little town, he would make the townsfolk march through the concentration camp and look at the bodies stacked up, because by the end, they didn't even have the wood to burn, and they couldn't deny it anymore. I mean, it was the same thing. I can't begin to pronounce the town of Auschwitz, like Oswiecim or something like that. My Polish is rough, I'm not going to lie. But those townspeople also denied that it had happened near them, but they complained about this kind of grit that would get on their sheets when they hung them out to dry. It would turn that white just a little gray, because there was so much in the air from burning bodies.
It was Jew lung disease, is what called it. Jew lung.
Yeah, I hear you. Jew lung. Yeah.
Jew. Gallows humor, the Holocaust. It's kind of
you need that humor. I mean, Hitler wasn't afraid of being assassinated; he was afraid of being laughed at. And that's a fact. He was terrified. I mean, they kept trying to kill him and missing, but had somebody snuck up and pulled his pants down, a generation might have been saved. Right. He was very, very scared man.
So laughing at the Holocaust is our N-word. The Jews.
I'm not laughing at the Holocaust. Far from it. What is amazing to me, you can't laugh at it. What was amazing and strange to me is I didn't know there was a snack bar at Auschwitz. The last thing I want is a nosh. when I come out, of the camp. But there is a giant thriving snack bar selling pizza and calzones. And it's, the best I can tell myself, maybe that is the greatest revenge. Maybe on some level that is so disrespectful of Nazis. But it's a long way around to come to that. I wasn't expecting it. Not something I had read about. Have you been there to any of them?
No, I
not the cafeteria. I mean the camps.
Is any? I'm not going to. No, yeah. I don't. I guess I should go. I just nothing. I don't feel. I grew up surrounded by children of survivors, and I totally understand. How did you find people who were the children of survivors? How do they differ from, like, say, you or people you knew who didn't have that experience? Well, there's a generalization that they inherit a lot of the guilt of the survivors. That because people just didn't survive. You do things to survive, and
that's what Primo Levi said. The best people were not the ones who lived.
He said that.
Yeah. And he survived. And then years later, threw down a staircase in Turin and took his own life, which happens.
Who did he throw down the staircase?
Himself.
He threw himself down the staircase.
Yeah.
I remember the fathers were tough. They walked around in those wife beater T-shirts, and they were tough. It is unimaginable. It's on a scale that is incredible, and you're forced to ask, could it happen here, or did it happen here? I mean, what are we doing?
Well, it did happen here. I mean, our country was founded on genocide.
Right. That's the whole
new revelation. I mean, that's just the fact. And you could argue that was every bit as bad in a different way. The means were different, but the end was essentially the same. And that's something you don't learn growing up. What was interesting to me doing research, I did not realize, maybe you knew this, that after the Holocaust, for a while, Jews themselves did not want to talk about it. It took like almost a generation before people came back around and started telling their stories or even being interested in their elders' stories.
Right. Have you been to Israel?
I have not. How about yourself?
No. Interesting that you would choose the concentration camps before Israel, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't like it was an either or. I've always known at some point I would be going to Poland and Germany. Just there's almost some kind of strange genetic pool. I mean, I found out the other day, my sister told me that my father was born in Ukraine. His mother was from Lithuania. His father, who was killed when he was 2, was from Russia. And on my mother's side, they're all Polish. So there's something that just drew me back to the country. And if I was going to go, that's what I wanted to see.
Right. Now, your dad was I think I read this somewhere, coal miner, and he
started out. He came up hard. He came on a boat by himself when he was 10, because his mother had to marry a cousin when he was 2 and leave him behind. She had to work to get the money to bring him over. It's just an amazing kind of tragic story. But to answer your question, yeah, he started out working hard jobs like that. Worked
Was he the attorney general?
Yeah, he ended up attorney general, and then he became a federal judge for like a year. And at 49, he was found with the motor running and the garage door pulled down, sitting in a car and in a garage full of carbon monoxide. So that's how that went down.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was the attorney general of Pennsylvania.
He was indeed, yes. Yeah. And now look who's running for governor of Pennsylvania. I mean, you know, how things evolve. Yeah.
What did you think? And 49, so you must have been, were you in college yet when that happened?
No, I was 15. I guess I was 16 years old. So yeah, that was, not a happy guy, obviously. He got what he wanted. He became a federal judge, was disillusioned. I don't know. I mean, we didn't talk that much, but I don't know how you were raised. I grew up in Pittsburgh in kind of a predominantly Catholic neighborhood. I was like basically the only Jew in a school of like 800. So I was kind of routinely beaten up for murdering Jesus, which
right.
I must have done in a blackout because but it colors how you feel about life, and you feel like an outsider your whole life,
Right.
And were you brought up among your own people, among Jewish people, or were you?
Yeah, I was in a pretty safe. I lived among other Jews, so it was pretty safe. That didn't. I didn't.
It wasn't a thing. Yeah.
I got beaten up for not killing Jesus. That's how Jewish.
Well, if they don't get you for one thing, it's just hard to be a kid. It's just hard to be a damn kid. You're always blamed for something.
And then you came to New York. You went to Columbia. Were you there during the riots? During when they crushed skulls? When Mark Rudd was there? When they were?
I was. Weirdly enough, yeah, I was there. And I remember being in a field. Funny, I've never talked about this. Being in a field and seeing like a whole phalanx of cops take their badges off, put them in their pockets, and then just come towards us swinging their billy clubs. I mean, that'll wake your ass up. That'll radicalize you fast if you weren't already. I mean, half the people were genuinely protesting Vietnam. The other half just wanted to get high and get laid and be in a giant throng.
Right.
I don't know which half.
Did you go into Hamilton Hall? Did you go into the?
I did all that shit. Yeah. And then they flushed us down the subways and chased us onto the subways. I mean, it was crazy, man. And the guy I lived with had his hand broken. I mean, it was. Look, people survived worse, but it was, in my young life, nothing like that had ever happened.
Were you tempted to, Mark Rudd, did you know Mark Rudd?
No, I was young when that happened. I was like, I guess, a freshman. He was an older guy, I believe.
Was there any lure to the SD? Well, the SDS was pretty, but the Weather Underground, a lot of these people ended up joining the Weather Underground. Were you intrigued by it at the time?
I was always intrigued by that stuff, but I'm not a joiner, much to my, whatever's the opposite of credit. I didn't. No, I thought about that. And it's fascinating to think what would have happened. Were you a young radical?
I had fantasies about, Mark Rudd. My parents liked Mark Rudd.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. They've, and Abby Hoffman and the Yippies.
Sure, yeah.
But not the Weather Underground. Not, I was fascinated by Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman because they understood spectacle. In terms of the protest movement of the 60s,
mm-hmm.
Was it naive to think that you could stop a war? And did they stop? I don't think they stopped the war.
That's a very good question. I mean, there was a whole theory, which expressed, among other people, by Thomas Pynchon and like Vineland, that the whole thing was arranged by Nixon. Just like the war on drugs was started by Nixon to have an excuse to go after hippies and black people. You know, that in fact, these young radicals were just absolute pawns, you know. This is sort of from the same school of thought that like the government gave people, you know, introduced LSD into the population to keep people, you know, sort of chilled out and checked out, you know, and less of a threat.
The protest movement, one could argue, at least in the late 60s, early 70s, became more of an issue than the war in Vietnam. If you asked most Americans, I think, or at least the ones who voted for Nixon, what are you angry about? They would say these kids, not the millions of kids we were killing in Vietnam. And it was millions. We killed. I mean, talk about circling back to Auschwitz and Dachau, just in terms of putting numbers on the board. If you look at the number of people we killed in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam.
Well, for that matter, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, if you're gonna go down that road, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting what you say. It's absolutely true that back in the Nixon days, it was all about the silent majority who hated those hippies who didn't take a bath. Remember, that was the whole thing, that they didn't bathe, didn't work, you know. And it was much more anger about that than it was about what was happening in Vietnam.
Which is incredible. So why do you think the Vietnam War started? It seems stopped. Why do you think it stopped? When you look at the 60s radicals who took over the college campuses and they burned files that were given over to nuclear scientists and whatever, it didn't stop anything.
No, it didn't. In fact, I remember taking over a building. There's a much more mundane aspect to that. There was the guy I just kind of knew vaguely, and I never didn't seem that smart. And he found his file in the dean's office, and we read it, and it said "good filler material." So,
what does that mean?
It means he was a guy they just needed to pad out the roster a little bit. Nothing too spectacular. Just a nondescript regular. You know, he was crushed. I mean, that was his experience of radicalism right there. He takes over a building and gets thoroughly shamed when he reads his own file.
He didn't give himself any A's or anything like that?
He didn't switch records. Yeah, that was pre-computer. You probably could have.
Did you ever get your FBI file?
I did not.
Would you be disappointed? I have been tempted over the years, but I would be disappointed to find out that there is none.
I don't know that I'm that important or ever was that much of a threat to anyone. But you know, maybe. Hey, I can dream.
Lou Costello and Bud Abbott had FBI files.
I have a copy of Sammy Davis's FBI file. I mean, yeah, they went after a lot of people. Everybody was a threat. I don't know about Lou Costello. I'm not sure. But then I don't know what he did in his free time.
Bud Abbott
had bombs, for all I know.
Bud Abbott apparently had an extensive collection of pornography back when, you know, stag films were, you know, that was something.
Wow.
And he was Jewish.
That's an image you want in your brain. But
Bud Abbott was Jewish. Did you know that?
No. So he was a pornography-loving Jew.
Yes.
Okay. Well, not the first, not the last.
Fatty Arbuckle. I haven't read I, Fatty in I love that book. You wrote a novel about Fatty Arbuckle. Tell us who Fatty Arbuckle is. Why hasn't there been a movie based on I, Fatty, because that, I know that David Chase
Mm-hmm. A lot of people,
to me, that period, that was the time I wanted to work in Hollywood during the silent era, mm-hmm. and everything smelled like orange blossoms. And who was Fatty Arbuckle?
Those are really wild times. He was a vaudeville guy. I'll keep just the shorthand, who very, very quickly was the first guy to make $1 million a year in Hollywood, and became a huge star, and got railroaded, some would say, due to a hideous, how could you say, just a combination of events. He was accused of murder when a woman in his hotel room named Virginia Rappe, R-A-P-P-E, buried in Hollywood forever, for those who'd like to visit, was found dead.
I go visit, I pour Coke for my homies.
Yeah, for Virginia? That's cool.
That's
like
actually a lie about Coca-Cola. It's a lie about the Coca-Cola bottle, right?
Yeah. The whole thing is very sketchy. I mean, he claimed in his defense that he was terrified. There is a whole theory, but you don't want to sound like blame the victim, but just scientifically, one explanation is that she had peritonitis, or possibly had a botched abortion not too far beforehand, and her bladder burst. Weirdly enough, the coroner lost her bladder. So that happened. But he was accused, he claimed that...
you make it really hard. You make it really hard not to laugh at horrible things. I don't know what it is, but when you say the coroner lost her bladder, you say it in this innocent, banal way, and you're taunting me. I know the way you say that.
Didn't it happen with Kennedy's brain? Am I right about that?
Yes. Yeah.
They lose vital organs. It's just this whole chain of evidence just breaks down. But he claimed that Buster Keaton, again, to make this shorthanded, he advised him to put something cold on her, press it down on her private parts to wake her up. Not in her, but on her. Who knows? But there was a well-known extortionist who had brought Virginia uninvited to that party that day up in San Francisco at the Fairmont, if I'm not mistaken. And she burst the door open and thought this was her $1 million day. What a payday.
Is it the mother?
What's that?
Was it Virginia Rappe's mother who was the extortionist?
No, not a mom. Just a friend, an acquaintance who happened to be in San Francisco the day that Roscoe was up there. And Adolph Zukor was very pissed at him anyway, because it was Paramount weekend and he was supposed to stay home and press the flesh for the big investors and the Wall Street guys and the fans. And he just blew out of town. And, there are so many theories. You know how these things work. There's always theories and conspiracies. Some would argue that on some level, Zukor engineered the whole thing, because once Arbuckle was accused, how could he ever be the funny fat man anymore? His claim to fame was he was the star that you could trust to babysit your daughter. Well, that's out the window. So Zukor was found to have given money to the DA of San Francisco. I hope this is my ability to tell a linear story has been somewhat compromised by an early history of drug abuse. So I hope this is coming.
I love talking. I could talk to you. You don't remember, but we
great time.
We could go 4 hours talking.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to, but I don't know how your audience would feel. But you do have like a 17-hour show every day, right? I mean, it's amazing. You put out like a 6-hour show, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
But this is what we grew up on. You grew up listening to these type of you weren't asleep at 1 a.m. You used to listen.
Oh no, I love this stuff. I still listen to Coast to Coast, for God's sake, when I can't sleep. You know, there's Maniac with the aliens and the
right. You know. So Fatty Arbuckle, did Adolf Zucker pay off the DA to hurt Fatty Arbuckle, or?
The DA was going after him. The DA was also running for governor, so there's wheels within wheels. But what is probably the most germane fact is that 3 juries found him innocent, one after the other. They just couldn't make it stick. And the last one, the jury was out for 12 minutes, came back and apologized for putting him through it and said that he had been a real man throughout. But it didn't matter. His career was toast. And it was on the back of that the Hays Commission was formed. The studio decided they wanted to bring in, basically, it all comes down to hating Jews. You know, everybody, the Christian morality and the reformers and the mothers against this and that, all wanted to shut down Hollywood because it was a nest of sin. And who runs Hollywood? Do I have to say it? The Jews. Right. And that's who they were coming for. So Zucker needed to throw them a sacrificial lamb, rather large sacrificial lamb, and it ended up being wonderful.
And ended up being, but then he became Will Be Good, a director. He directed, right?
He tried to direct. Yeah, he directed shorts for a while, and then he had just literally on the day he died got the news that he could act again, and he was going to actually appear in a movie. And the strange thing is, he did a couple shorts before that, and you heard his voice, which was a curious high kind of, not what you expect. It was kind of a high tremolo, kind of like, a little higher.
And it survived because most of it, they were nitrates.
Like one or two examples of him talking. Not great. He might have been one of those who couldn't have made the transition.
There's a movie, I think it's called Coney Island, with Buster Keaton and Fatty Arbuckle, where they bring. Did you ever see this?
I don't know that I have.
It's great. It's 2 married guys who take their wives to Coney Island, and they want to leave. They want to go get laid. This is pre-Hays Commission, and the level of misogyny. I'm watching that. I'm thinking, this is as funny. This was just unbridled hatred for wives and adultery. Just these guys want to cheat on their wives. And it's so funny. He was, would you say, up there? How close to Keaton, Chaplin, and the other guy?
I think he was one of the funniest. I mean, he came up with Chaplin, but as he always said, the common man likes me, the eggheads love Chaplin. Interestingly enough, though, and I don't know if you know this, the first person to mock Hitler in Hollywood on film was not Chaplin. It was the Three Stooges, who had an episode where they created the land of Moronica, and of which, they had a Hitler parody. And I believe that Curly might have played Goering, who had some grotesque name like Gerbledy Gerbil or something like that.
Right. And it ends on a boat, right? Isn't there the scene?
It very well might. I can remember half of a lot of facts, but
right.
Whole facts, a little challenging as I'm getting up there in years. I hope you can't relate.
Defend the Three Stooges.
Defend the Three Stooges? Do they need defending? I mean,
yes.
They were a vaudeville act who practiced unbridled violence and probably are more responsible for kids losing their eye than any other act in Hollywood. But, when I was a kid, I came home from school and watched them, and kind of loved them.
Oh, my God.
Again, Jews, let's not kid ourselves. The tragedy, apparently Larry was a real ladies' man and spent all their money, and Curly wanted to be an opera singer. But out of loyalty to his brothers, he became Curly. And the rest is history.
My favorite Verdi opera is Let It Eat. As he used to, he wanted to be an opera.
He wanted to be an opera singer. Yeah.
Will you come back at least to promote the book? I want
Sure. We
talk to you about.
Talk about it? Yeah, I'd love to. It's not coming out for a while.
And you're going to be in New York to promote the book, and
New York a few days. Yeah.
We have some questions from our virtual studio audience. Rodrigo has a question for Jerry. Ohio just passed a bill demanding internal and external genital inspections of children doing sports accused of being trans by jealous parents. Florida just announced it's ending Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming care for adults. How do we explain to people who aren't affected yet that we are the baddies and this is how fascism begins? Rodrigo comes to us from Mexico. Could you make the leap to attacking transgender children and internal and external genital inspections to fascism? Is that how fascism begins?
With genital inspections?
Yeah.
There's probably an unwritten history out there that we don't know about. But I mean, for sure, all kidding aside, I mean, what they're doing to trans kids is grotesque and about as, can you say fucked up on your show? I don't know. You can and did. Yeah, I mean, I think just the fear that, you know, straight hetero people have and the way they feel threatened by these kids is unbelievable. But that's what defines our country, right? And absolutely, that's one road to fascism. One stop along the road, I would say.
Did you know that achieving things culturally in the 60s and the 70s, that we had to fight to keep it? Did you realize that we were going to have to fight to keep what we had, that wanting more is nice, but we had to work also to keep it?
What it are you referring to that was ever actually accomplished in the 60s, that was fought?
There were, I think the social issue, abortion.
Sure. Well, clearly we have to fight to keep that. I mean, come on.
Women's, equality for women, civil rights for African American.
Yeah.
There are.
Well, it all seems to be deteriorating now, and you can't blame it all on Trump, because I think he's just he's not the cause, but a symptom. But I did not anticipate, but probably should have, the way down the road, everything would begin to crumble and would have to start fighting for it again. Did you see all this coming?
I honestly, this is the God's honest truth. I was thinking about this the other night.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college,
mm-hmm.
I remember thinking I missed it. Missed it. Now it's no longer, there's nothing, I swear to God, I thought this, fighting, there are no more heroes left. There's nothing to fight for. All the heroes on the left won and the right is over. I thought there's no way we'd ever see the rise of the right wing in America. And I regretted that, because all my heroes were I.F. Stone,
mm-hmm.
people who took on the fascists in America.
Well, you've got your opportunity now, because they've all come back, and I don't even think fascism is coming. I mean, I think it's more or less here. It just hasn't been completely unwrapped yet, but the present is under the tree for sure. Don't you think?
I think I think we have a sanitized version of fascism in America, where if you're white mm-hmm. and you can somehow keep it together, you won't see it. But people disappear. There's no question that people are disappearing. And if you, as long as you practice willful ignorance, you don't see it. But underneath, there's something bubbling in everybody here in the United States, and it's terrifying.
Well, you said it the other day. I was listening to one of your shows. You just said, this is a very stupid country. You went on this rant about the ridiculous, the laws that don't get changed, the laws that do get changed, right, and how everything that is obvious is not obvious to the bulk of Americans and to our government. And, the fact that the fate of humanity rests on the meaty shoulders of the likes of Joe Manchin and Arnold, it's grotesque. But right, that's who we are, right?
Yes.
Do you feel like you can't be heroic in combating that? Because I think I would venture to say there's some heroes out there, maybe. And
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I got to get on the phone with you and have you come. Then I moved to New York and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, because we have to wrap it up.
Yes.
I know you don't think you're disciplined. There's a documentary out about George Carlin, Judd and Kelly Carlin.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is talking about George's discipline. People are always amazed. Mm-hmm. Seriously, he took, you're a man of letters. You never stop writing.
I don't do that from discipline. I'm propelled by rank fear. I write because I create a situation where the only thing more uncomfortable and difficult than writing is not writing. So then I will flee to the computer or the pen or the paper because I just want to get it all down before it's over, especially at this stage of life, man. We don't know when that ticket's going to be punched. So I don't know if it's discipline. I'm just going to say I'm sort of writing as fast as I can,
And what is the process? Do you write in the morning, the evening? When do you write?
Well, I suppose this is where discipline would come in. I write kind of all the time. And, thanks to the miracle of iPhones, doubtless assembled by 9-year-olds in China, speaking of fascism, thanks to those kids, I get to dictate now. I can walk around spewing and I can type it up later or, go right into the dictation system. So I'm always kind of working on a few things. At this point, it's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's just about getting it down, And what drives
when you were 18?
Yeah.
Were you? Did you have that drive to get it all down?
I wanted to be a writer. I would have loved to be in a rock and roll band, but I sucked as a musician. So it's sort of like what they said in Death of a Salesman. It's like about Willie. He had all the wrong dreams. I think I might have had all the wrong dreams. I just wanted to be a writer. I wanted to live that life. I liked the idea of just never having to check in and punch a clock and do all that shit. Because that's my residual hippiedom. I had an older sister who was a hippie, and I probably aspired to that. Did you, or do you consider yourself a disciplined cat?
Well, I was, as you were saying that, I was just thinking how I had a sense memory. I was happy for a second. As you were talking, I felt the kind of, there are these waves of happiness that temporarily wash over me. And it's bizarre.
I feel very happy that I could somehow irrationally cause a spark of happiness. Are you by nature not a happy guy? Am I going out on a limb?
I was thinking about it. I was visiting New Jersey where I grew up, and there were smells and like a summery smell. And I was like trying to get back to that time when I was like 8 and the rabbi was cuddling me and talking about my schmeck. Beautiful.
Yeah. That's a nice memory. That is a lovely memory. I don't really think about happiness, David. I think What I aspire to most in life is not making other people depressed. You know, my mother could walk into a room and everybody in it would suddenly be like, oh, fuck, I hate myself. I don't even know why. It was like the world's worst superpower, you know? You just made you hate yourself.
Great idea for a movie.
Sure. World's worst superpower. And that's my thing. I just don't want to make people depressed. Whatever I'm feeling, probably better not to go into it. But I don't want to depress you. That's my thing, you know? So I'm glad I gave you that little, was it remembered happiness, like a Proustian thing? Where you just had this,
I bit into
Madeline.
Yeah. And he was Jewish.
Really? I did not know that.
He was Jewish, which makes sense. Only a Jew could have like an orgasm from a cookie. That's the kind of thing where this is a cookie. I'm going to write, I've had cookies before, but this Madeline, I'm going to write 15,000 pages just about this cookie. Yeah, he was Jewish. Marcel Proust.
Everything. He had mother issues, that's for sure.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up.
It's such a treat talking to you, man. I'm glad we.
Yeah. Let me. My listeners need to know who you are, so let me give you an outro here. Go buy 999: One Man's Tale of Depression, Psychic Torment, and a Bus Tour of the Holocaust. 999 comes out on July 5th, and buy the book. If it doesn't make you laugh, if you think you love the Holocaust, boy, are you going to love? That would be some horrible blurbs.
That may be the blurb I deserve. Thank you.
I'm going to, next time you come back, I'm going to pitch some blurbs. And I told you the story about Walter Matthau going to the camps with his wife and Billy Wilder.
Tell me that story where he gets mad at his wife.
They had a big fight. He's traveling through Germany with Billy Wilder and Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. And Walter Matthau and his wife have a big fight. Then they get in the limo to visit Auschwitz, and everybody's quiet for 6 hours. And they're riding back with everybody. And Walter Matthau's wife says, Walter, I'm sorry. He goes, it's too late. You ruined Auschwitz for me.
I cannot hear that story often enough. That is a great story.
Right.
It's funny. I heard the same story with Jackie Gleason, so I might have got it completely wrong. It was Walter Matthau, right?
Yeah, I think Jackie Gleason might have been a bit of an anti-Semite.
He looked like, he might have been. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I heard. I like to. 999 comes out on July 5th. The great Jerry Stahl. He is the writer everybody in Hollywood wishes they were, and I mean that.